The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on the Nova Society are those of our guests and panel members and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of any institution any member of the Nova Society is associated with. The material information presented on the Nova Society is for general information purposes only. Reproduction or dissemination for the purpose other than education is prohibited without express written consent of the Nova Society. We'd like to welcome everyone back to the Nova Society, and today our panel will be taking a look at a recent decision by President Joe Biden to not send 3,500 2,000-pound bombs to Israel in their fight against Hamas. What does this mean politically? What does this mean for the relationships between the United States and Israel? And where do we go forward from this decision? Is this a good political decision? Is it a bad political decision? And we will discuss that. So let's listen in. So all right, let's switch it up a little bit. Let's go to Biden not giving Israel 3,500 bombs.
Yeah.
What are we thinking? Good. First of all, let me frame it a little bit. Good political decision. No. Bad political decision. Do you think it's justified?
So I do think it's justified. I think it's a bad political decision. I think it's a bad move overall. I understand why he's doing it. I also understand that, they've got plenty of those bombs right now anyway. Hopefully they don't use them. Look, I really do not like the idea of the United States demanding that Israel send its sons and daughters into harm's way rather than put the Palestinian in Gaza's sons and daughters in harm's way. It just doesn't strike me as being a righteous thing to do. And I think the best thing that could happen for Joe Biden politically is that this thing, however it's going to end, and it really, for Israel's sake, has to end with every member of Hamas dead that they could possibly get, no matter how many people get in the way, that it happens sooner rather than later, and just get Hamas out of the picture so that you can begin talking to somebody else about resolving this situation that's been going on since 1947.
So do you think this is a rebuke of Israel or a rebuke of Bibi Netanyahu?
I would say Netanyahu myself. I mean, I can see, I'm not as well versed in this issue as Scott is on how to test Netanyahu. I don't see that Biden, I think that whatever Biden does, it's going to be challenged and it's going to be criticized. I don't think he's got any good, or I don't think he has any good choices here.
Yeah,
whatever
I agree.
He does to be wrong in one manner or for one group or another. I'm certainly happy not to send more weapons to anybody. Well, I think sending them to Ukraine is a good idea. I think that's a must. I think that it's probably more Netanyahu as far as Biden is concerned and not Israel. And unfortunately, because Netanyahu represents Israel, it becomes difficult to separate the two.
You know what? If Benny Gantz became the PM of Israel tomorrow, or anybody else for that matter, they would still do the same thing that Netanyahu is doing right now. And that there is an imperative to wipe this group out. And the fact that, look, I just detest Bibi Netanyahu as well. I have from the beginning, I think, pretty much of his 20 years as the leader of Israel. I think he's been bad for Israel, and I think that his time is short there. I know that they're not planning for an election until at the earliest September, but at that election he should be ousted from power, whether he helped Hamas over the years, which he is at least rumored to have done, and chose Hamas over the PA because Hamas, like himself, doesn't want a two-state solution. And so based on that common ground, decided to fund them or allow them to be funded. And you sometimes you grab the snake and you get bit, and he got bit, and deservedly so, getting bit. Although unfortunately, he didn't pay the consequence. Plenty of other people did. But as far as Biden's concerned, he's not denying them all weapons. Just these, a 2,000-pound bomb is a weapon of mass destruction, and he's denying them those, which they already have in their arsenal anyway. This is the symbolic gesture that's going to do no good to Biden at all. He is not going to. It is not going to turn the protesters around on him. They're still going to hate him. Hopefully by election day they get over it, because a vote for anybody but Biden is a vote for Trump. And that would be much worse for the Palestinian people than Joe Biden. The situation there is terrible, obviously. Nobody wants to see babies, getting hurt, or certainly not killed. And the Hamas has long basically held the Palestinians in Gaza hostage, and they're continuing to be hostages of Hamas there. There's no way for them to get out, and they can't quite get out of the way. And this is just, the sooner it ends, the better.
Well, the other issue is finding Hamas's leadership. I mean, I don't even know if anybody knows where they are, and I bet they're not anywhere near harm's way. And I don't even know if they can be identified or located.
Well, there's good news. There's good news there, Brooke, because they are easily identified, because most of them have spent time in Israeli prisons, and they know who they are. They have names, they have faces, they have fingerprints, they have DNA probably. They know who they are, and they probably do know where they are. Whether they can get at them or not is another question. And whether how many people you have to kill. Do you have to kill an innocent civilian for every Hamas member that you kill? That's a calculation. And, certainly when we were fighting against the Japanese during World War II, we made the calculation that we were going to take the war to those people.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see this being that much different in terms of, there's collateral damage, and you're fighting a war against the people, not just their government.
Are there other leaders who are coming up or are being created that Israel may not know about?
I mean, there are children who are growing into adulthood who are probably going to be the next wave of leaders, right? Of this movement, or the one that comes after it, or we know this.
Right.
It doesn't change. We're not changing anything. You're killing one person, and they'll be substituted by another person. The only way to solve this is ultimately to to kill the terrorists that you can kill, and then take this issue off the table, so it is no longer one that they're fighting for. Mm-hmm. Whether they ever accept Israel's existence, Hamas has declared that they will not. There's no two-state solution that would compel them to sit idly by and allow Israel to exist. So they will forever be attacking Israel. Mm-hmm. And it's really just up to Israel to decide how they're going to protect themselves from that happening. Mm-hmm. But the person who is the most likeliest person to lead the Palestinians after all this is done is sitting in an Israeli prison right now,
and has an opportunity to be one of those released if the hostage deal progresses the way it is. Now, there is one thing I'm going to, on very rare occasions, do I push back on my friend Scott, but I am going to push back just a little. The idea that this is similar to us taking the war to the Japanese in World War II. I think it's a different dynamic. The Japanese people who basically saw the emperor as a god, were truly invested in everything that was going on. And this was to break their spirit, as opposed to probably most of the Palestinians in Gaza, who probably are not behind Hamas, but are pretty much, as we've already said here, they're hostages in their own right, maybe a bit of a different a different idea of hostages. I read an article the other day which really made a very brilliant analogy here, was that if you've got 5 people go into a bank and they rob the bank and the police are called and they hold 75 people in the bank as hostages, Israel is faced with basically the same scenario. Do you just blow up the bank and get rid of the hostage takers and the bank robbers, foregoing the innocent hostages that are there? Or do you take the risk of letting maybe a couple of these hostage taker bank robbers escape, which means they could do it again to another bank and take more hostages? So, I mean, I thought that was an interesting analogy. Was, yeah, you want to eliminate Hamas as much as possible. However, they are using the Palestinian people as a shield, who probably do not want them there either. I don't think there's very many Palestinians that say, hey, today was a good day. This was a great idea by our people. I mean, of course, you're going to see the newsreels where people were cheering right after October 7th. But this is a area with over 2 million people, and yeah, you saw maybe a couple, 3, 4, 500 people, a very small percentage. I bet you a lot of people in the Gaza Strip were basically hiding in their homes, because they're as much at risk from Hamas as anybody else. I do agree that Hamas needs to be eliminated because they will not accept Israel, and it's an ideology that's not going to go away. We can defeat, just as we have always said about Germany in the 1930s. We defeated Germany. We did not defeat Nazism. Nazism exists still today. The concept of wanting to see Israel as a nation eliminated from the face of the earth is not going to go away simply by eliminating Hamas. Unfortunately, that ideology will always remain. It'll probably remain for as long as Israel remains. It's sort of like the Iranians, always running down the streets, death to America. They don't even know us, most of those people. They have no idea who we are. But it is an idea, an ideology that they've embraced. And once again, once you get to that fanatical point, like the Japanese during World War II, worshiping their emperor as a god, getting behind the leadership, the kind of culture that the Japanese had at the time, which was very submissive to the power structure that existed. I think that the Gaza situation with Hamas and the Palestinians being different, I think that puts a new wrinkle into this, because you're not going to break the spirit of a country by killing the innocents in Gaza, where that's the whole idea of why we dropped two nuclear bombs, hydrogen bombs, on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, to break the spirit of the people. And I don't think killing any of the civilians in Palestine will do that. Hamas is a fanatical, as you've mentioned, Scott. It's a death cult. They're simply a death cult, and they don't care what their people think, and their people cannot, for some reason, overthrow them. But after the 2 bombs struck, that's when you saw the emperor come out in Japan and say, hey, he took a far more, I wouldn't say leading role, but a more public role to basically say, listen, this is over and done with. So that would be the difference that I would make to that. I think it's a bit of a different situation.
Also in Germany, at least some of the time, particularly as Hitler himself and the Third Reich in general became less popular, individuals were forced to line up and do the Hitler salute and cheer and wave the swastika. So after the bomb, or the attack, the October 7th attack, the people cheering for that, the Palestinians. What I wonder was what was outside the frame, whether the people were cheering of their own volition, whether they were doing that at gunpoint, whether they were promised something. So it's not clear how much genuine support exists for Hamas. I mean, and the Israelis, many Israelis are not that excited about Netanyahu anymore either.
Well, no. But and like I say, you're right, making the a lot of Germans, what they basically said was, well, we never knew. Once again, we're talking about very many different cultures here. The culture of Japan was quite a bit different during the 1940s, 1930s, 20s, 30s, and 40s than it is today. Right. Different structure, different ideology. These were, in many ways, very fanatical toward their emperor. Right. However, Hamas, I do not believe what the destruction that Hamas has created in Gaza, even before all this happened. If you were a Palestinian citizen in Gaza, your life wasn't all that good.
Right.
I mean, it really wasn't all that good. I mean, at least Netanyahu can say, well, you know what? Yeah, maybe I was a crappy leader of Israel, but their lives were not as bad. I mean, I have family to live there, and they said, yeah, other than just the general politics, life was okay here. Everybody went to work and, lived their lives, and that was it. And I totally agree with Scott that Netanyahu's number one mandate was to protect Israel, and he failed miserably at that. Now, will that equate to him being ousted in September? I think that if this war is still going on, if this is still an open book, I would say that he probably is going to stay, unfortunately, because nations do not like changing leaders during time of war.
Yeah.
They just don't. It's historically they don't do it. Lincoln, who wasn't all that popular during the Civil War, he still won the second term, but he was not that popular. He was just better than the alternative. And I think that, nations that are in the middle of conflict, serious conflict with other nations or with internally even, I think the people have a very hard time making a change to their leadership during those times. Look at Roosevelt, four doggone terms. Who'd have thought that? But, I think that's kind of the way it goes. Scott's giving me a frown. What are you thinking, Scott?
Well, first of all, I think that the assumption that most of the Palestinians in Gaza are not for Hamas is unproven, to say the least.
Well, I agree.
And so we have this idea like, oh, these nice people and they're just stuck there. I know it's expensive to get out because Hamas is the one that was charging them to leave. They controlled that border, and it was expensive for them to get out. But they certainly could have gotten out if you don't like where you're living. All of us come from families who left one place at some point in time that was where living was no longer tenable and came here. And certainly there were ways for the Palestinians who wanted to the most to get out of Gaza. Gaza was declared uninhabitable by 2023 by the UN, and it really needed to to do a number of major things to become a habitable place to live, and yet 2 million people stayed there. So I don't want to get into the like a tit for tat on whether they're good people or bad people. I'm sure there's a big mix in there, one way or another. But the bottom line is that this situation needs to change, and the quicker it changes, the better.
Right.
And you're asking a great leap of faith of the Israeli people to pull all of the settlers out of the West Bank, as they did in Gaza in 2005. But there are a lot more of them in the West Bank. They're not going to be happy campers when they come out of there. And then allowing the Palestinians to live that close to them so that this kind of thing that happened on October 7th could happen at any time from now until eternity is going to be, that's going to be a major leap of faith on the part of the Israelis. And it's going to require Arab countries stepping in and providing security, all kinds of things. It's a tough road. And, I think too many people are ignorant about the history there. I think that too many people, I was just asked to appear on a radio show that, because there's a sort of leftist judge who does this radio show, a black man who's one of the first black men to graduate from Harvard Law School. And he looks at this conflict through the lens of post-colonialism and racism, and sees that the Palestinians are somehow black and the Israelis are somehow white, and thinks that this is a conflict similar to apartheid or racism in America or so on and so forth. And I think that these are flawed analogies.
Yes.
And that it's not a particularly useful way to look at the conflict. Although I'm all for creating as many lenses to look at things as you can, but this one seems particularly tortured to me.
Interesting.
Well, it seems to be framed for a purpose, to make an analogy. Sometimes we try to make analogies we always run home. So it's just sound, when I was listening to you, it sounds like it's an attempt to make an analogy for the racial divide everywhere that exists. And no, I don't. I would totally disagree with that idea that, the Palestinians are black and the Israelis are white, and this is a black-white thing. But sometimes when that's the way you view the world, sometimes you can't view it in any other way. But that does give me an opportunity, because I know she listens, my niece who lives in the West Bank, and would be one of those settlers that would have to be moving out. So I get to give a shout out to her, because I know she listens all the time. And hopefully they're safe and in good health. But that analogy, I don't get it. I don't get it.
Might as well
at
do
all.
Cowboys and Indians.
Yeah, exactly. You know what? Yeah, why not? Yeah, that's an analogy that really does not work for me at all. Did you go on that show?
I haven't done it yet. No, I'm supposed to listen to the radio program first to get the sense of
get a feel for it before you make a decision. I think that's a wise choice, because I don't think that your opinions would be overly popular.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we could have a good conversation. But the interesting thing is that Israel is like 55% Arab, Mizrahi, and it's not. It's like 55-45 for the European, the Sephardic versus the European population. So that is not even operative anymore. Here it's exactly the opposite. I think like 85% of Jews in America are from Europe, Ashkenazim, and 15% are Sephardic, or from Arab countries or the rest of the world. It's completely the opposite in Israel, the 55-45 split. So again, there are a whole bunch of things that complicate this all, including history, including prehistory. So there's a great deal of complication. But the sooner this particular conflict gets resolved, I think the better. And the best thing that probably Joe Biden could have done is give those bombs to the Israelis and said, do what you need to do and just get it over with quickly. That would have been the most politically expedient thing for to happen here. and allow people to, if you want to go vote for Trump, go vote for Trump. You get the country you deserve.
And you're probably and you're right. Probably would have been the most politically expedient, but and yeah, it wouldn't have helped him. Although I don't think this decision helped him at all. I don't think it's gonna help him in the least. But I think you're right about the idea of history and our view of, especially the Americans' view, when we view places like the Middle East. I'm always taken back to the fact, and I'm Roman Catholic, when you walk into a Catholic church and you see a replication of Jesus Christ, who was a historical figure, did exist, and they show him as this person that looks like they're from Hollywood with long black hair, white, just
Blue
the
eyes.
beard, blue eyes, the beard kind of thing. That is our Hollywood idea of what Jesus Christ looked like, when in reality he probably looked more like the Arabs of today or of the time, because that's who he actually was. He was not, you could not make Keanu Reeves into put a beard on him and say, "Oh, there's Jesus Christ." No, that's not what the man looked like. But we always try to view these things from the lens that we best understand. And to your judge there that wants you on that radio show, I think when he's making this analogy, he's doing the exact same thing. He's taking what he knows well, race relations, and he's applying it to everything. So I would say it's the Cornel West. The Cornel West approach of, when you're a hammer, every problem is a nail.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
there you go.
Yes.
There you go. You really
And by the way, if we want to talk about
legit.
hypocrites, how about Republicans in Congress, blasting Biden for withholding this? They've withheld it for 6 months.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, no kidding. Yes, and the hope, of course, is, and we all know this, that the American public's attention span is very, very short, and we forget. And nobody likes it to be called out, but you're right. For 6 months, they held up all this stuff.
Right.
And now all of a sudden, we held up 3,500 bombs, and now all of a sudden, Biden is he hates Israel. No, he doesn't. You've got plenty of stuff. You've got plenty of things. You could do it with what you've got.
And I think the Russians made a major breakthrough just in the last couple of days in Ukraine, because they held up the aid to Ukraine for so long. And it's just, look, they're such hypocrites. I mean, I guess that's politics, right?
Yeah, well, that is politics. So that's all the time we have for today's episode. The Nova Society is a production of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, the Journal of Interdisciplinary Conflict Science. The JCIS is an open journal for upcoming scholars. The JCIS is currently accepting article submissions on an ongoing basis. The JCIS is a publication of Nova Works, a scholarly depository at Nova Southeastern University. A link to the journal is in our description. We'd also like to thank our podcast partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, who is our editing partner, and Podkite, who does all of our analytics. We'd also like to thank iHeartRadio, where people get their music and podcasts, Apple iTunes, the largest source for music and podcasts on the internet, Spotify, the most popular source for the Nova Society. The Nova Society is available on all these and other quality platforms mentioned in our description. We'd also like to thank our listeners. Without you, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a comment, a question, or would like to be a guest on the Nova Society, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. Always remember, the power of society is knowledge. So for Dr. Scott Gershwer, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Priscilla Hobbs, and all of us here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Be well, and we hope to see you again next time.